Welcome to the Business Trendsetter Podcast Innovators Series. Insights and unconventional wisdom from innovators driving success through embracing trends. Welcome your host, Manny Turan from Spark Partners. Welcome to the Business Trendsetter Podcast Innovators, where we discover the story behind the story of success, failure, and all the things that an entrepreneur and business executive kind of go through. And today's guest, we have Frank Vidal, who is just in the truest sense of the matter, he is a guy who understands business, understands social media, created something called Tucson Thrive, which I want to definitely explore, and also is the program development director, I'm not sure the exact role, for the Tohono Park. And I want to understand all these things. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the pre-discussion here, we were talking about how a lot of entrepreneurs don't really have necessarily a single place to go for mentorship. And, you know, they're getting mentorship from different organizations, from maybe an uncle or their grandmother, or they're kind of piecing it together. And so this is a forum for us in a different way to give back. And I know at Tucson Thrive, you're doing a lot of this as well. Can you give us a background of what that is?
Yeah. So Tucson Thrive is a community group, is, you know, the kind of what it is. And what happened really is back in the day, I was having coffee with a lot of different people, and which was great. You know, people were reaching out to me because of my role with Tohono Chul. People were reaching out to me because of my LinkedIn presence. I go to a lot of community events, networking events, and something clicked in my head, and I almost felt a little selfish. And so I said, I am meeting with so many awesome people from our community. I feel a little selfish that I am hogging all of the information myself. And so that's kind of a bit about how Tucson Thrive came to be. Tucson Thrive is a free virtual mastermind group. We meet every single week except holidays. And the first half of the program, we have discussion. Sometimes it could be a dozen people. Sometimes we've had almost, I think, 40 people or so. And we kind of talk about all different sorts of things. Bottlenecks, whether it's personal, business, we talk about politics, we talk about personal development, sales, marketing, lead generation, marketing funnels, philosophy, faith, cults, all sorts of things.
Wow.
And then the second half of the program, I do an interview of a different community member. And so the interview is not your typical, hey, I'm going to interview a CEO, an executive director, a C-suite level person. We take a very different approach. Now, we do interview those people, but that's not the goal, like a lot of organizations. Our goal really, and our belief, is that we can learn from anyone at any age, at any stage of their career. And so a lot of the times, I would say 75% of the time, we're talking about personal stuff. We're talking about passions and what kind of makes them tick. The other 25%, we're talking about work. Right. And so it just kind of depends on who, what their interests are. So,
wow, that last part is very compelling, and there's something to be said about the humility in that, right? If you look at the social media platforms, they are covered with people that are standing on stage that have a message, right? The Simon Sinek's of the world, the Tony Robbins, the Gary V's, the Grant Cardones. I mean, the list goes on. And sometimes for people, we look at those individuals that are up there on the stage, and there's still a big divide between maybe their culture, maybe where this entrepreneur is thinking they could be. And, you know, I look at, Grant Cardone and his lifestyle, they think, well, that's too lofty for me. And how can I really get some some truthful experience and insight. Whereas with your more, I don't know what we even call it, maybe more human, more reachable interviews, that might connect with people in a different way.
Oh, totally. I would almost call it an experience. And what I like to say about Tucson Thrive is people either love it or they hate it. And the reason why people love it is we literally it's not very surface level. We go straight into a deep dive. We go straight into vulnerability. And we've had guest speakers where they're literally, everyone's crying. Maybe it was spousal abuse. Maybe it was emotional abuse. Maybe they are going through a divorce. Maybe they were a part of a cult. Something happened in their life, something traumatic, and that's what we talk about. And really, those are the people that love it. You know, they want to be vulnerable. They want to be real. They want to create those authentic relationships. And the people that hate it, they're the people that don't want that. And so we've had so many people just come once, and we ask them a hard-hitting question. They maybe they answer, you know, and then we never see them again.
Wow.
And you know, it's not. I don't want to say that's the goal, but it's a good byproduct of the program that we're providing. And so a lot of people have kind of been weeded out, and that's okay, because truly we're trying to build a community of people who want to be vulnerable and want to grow together. And I keep using the word vulnerable, and I think it's because I think that kind of sums up the type of people that we attract. And it's kind of built this culture around vulnerability, and it's been great.
Yeah, that's a word that I like a lot. Having started a business from scratch that grew quickly, that I then had to put down in the course of 6 years, and then sharing my story with people. And you know, sometimes people can't believe that I'm so open. But my personal belief is that if you want to go, you know, the idea, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, invite others to go with you, kind of a mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think vulnerability can almost supercharge that whole framework. You know, CEOs and founders that we speak with that are going far, fast, that are supercharged, there's something in there where they opened up, and they either have a board, or they have coaches like ourselves, or a good buddy that they can lean on, or a framework of friends. They can put it all out there and get some good feedback. So that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, just to piggyback what you just shared, I feel like that's when you actually do the growing, right? I just think about things in my life where I had my back against the wall. I had no other options. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was depression, maybe it was fear, anxiety, whatever it could be. And I feel like those are the moments in my life where like I did the most amount of growth. And so I don't know, I kind of push the bounds sometimes with my day job, with the community at large outside of Tucson Thrive, because I literally want to have those hard-hitting conversations, those intellectual conversations. And what I've found, and that's been one of the biggest hurdles, is most people don't want that. I think most people say they want that. Most people say they want to be authentic. They want to be part of those communities, but they don't actually invest the time into doing it, or having those hard conversations.
You're absolutely right. Okay, so you mentioned in this platform, you talk about social media and life stories and business in general and entrepreneurship. How often do you talk about trends? Have you ever had a discussion on trends?
I think periodically on Tucson Thrive we do. I wouldn't say it's categorized. We don't position it or frame it as a trend, but some of the discussion questions are trends. I think last week, or perhaps the week before, we talked about the trend on LinkedIn about it's becoming a little bit like Facebook. And so the trend of, hey, what's too personal and what's too professional? And is there a mix? How do we blend it? And it was pretty interesting. And obviously we're having a conversation about LinkedIn specifically, and obviously LinkedIn's a professional network. And I would say most people are like the blend. They like, the educational component of maybe going to an event or going to a workshop, but they also like to hear what that person had to say about it. What was their experience? How did they interpret? What was their key takeaway? I think the consensus was that nobody likes to see just photos of puppies and babies or whatever without the professional context attached to it, which I don't know. I think LinkedIn is still very young, even though it's been around for a while. And I think it'll be a completely different platform 5-10 years from now.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to come back to that. But I want to also say that the way that Spark Partners, the way that Adam Hartung and I look at trends, we look at global trends like demographics, AI, the gig economy, connectedness, the environment. There's so many big global trends that are impacting our everyday life. And, our philosophy is that no matter what you try to do, you cannot beat them. And even if a new president comes in and changes something, there's still going to be this overwhelming tectonic plate type of activity pushing the trend forward.
I agree.
Would you say that in the conversations you've had in Tucson Thrive or with LinkedIn or your just personal experience, how much have you seen AI play into these conversations?
A ton. We have, I would say maybe not every week, but maybe every other week, there's a discussion question about AI, ChatGPT, whether it's video, text. I think it's interesting because if we're talking about LinkedIn, and let's just give some metrics, let's talk about impressions. The big trend currently is impressions are down 50% or more. And I mean, last year, I'm not a big influencer. I'm not a big, viral person. I think I have a good following and I build a community, but I had over 1 million impressions.
Wow.
Now, that's only to probably on average, maybe 5,500 connections. And you have to keep in mind, 99% of my connections are in Arizona. If somebody sends me a connection request out of Arizona, 99.9% of the time I reject it. And so I'm not really interested in building a following outside of my local community. And so that's my niche. That's my target audience. And so when it comes to AI, what I've really noticed since November of 23, when ChatGPT came out, I would say for 6 months, everything was status quo. Now I log into LinkedIn and I see ChatGPT everywhere.
Really?
And, I do some LinkedIn coaching and ghostwriting for some individuals here in town. And I can see it right away. I feel like I love AI. I love ChatGPT. I think it is a wonderful tool. I use it a lot myself. But the problem is in regards to LinkedIn, social media, building a connection, telling a story, is that it's all starting to sound the same. And because it's all starting to sound the same and people can pump out content, like it's, like I can put out 10 posts, right? ChatGPT. Everyone's able to post and everyone is posting a lot more. And so I think that's why impressions are down. There's just more in the market. There's more content out there. And so I think, I don't want to say it's harder. I think you just have to be more, you need to strategize. You need to be really focused on what type of content you're putting out if you're going to build a community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think oftentimes when the crowd is, you can in a crowd of people and like at a football game, if there's one person yelling and everybody else is quiet, you can hear what they're saying. But if you've got 50,000 people yelling, you're only going to hear maybe the ones that are around you and that are loudest. So that's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out in the coming years. And as you mentioned, the next 5-10 years, these platforms will maybe be fundamentally different. So we'll see where that goes. So regarding your background in LinkedIn, why LinkedIn? Because you had all these people are posting on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snap. I mean, there's all these other platforms that are more leaning in towards your age. I'll just say that, and your background. I mean, it just makes quote unquote more sense. And the older demographic, the 50 and above, like me, were sort of leaning into the LinkedIn crowd and maybe YouTube for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start by saying LinkedIn is literally the only social media platform I have. And so I think it's been maybe, 6-8 years since I had a Facebook. I had an Instagram for a few months, didn't really get into it. And I think the thing for me really is LinkedIn is the only platform where I could nerd out and talk about the things that I cared about, and people actually cared about it. So I felt like I cannot post what I'm talking about on LinkedIn on Facebook. I think it would flop. Nobody wants to hear about, at least not my personal connections. Now you have to remember, when I had a Facebook and an Instagram, it was my friends, right? It was my high school friends. It was my family. It was my coworkers, whatever. I didn't have a global platform of other thought leaders and professional relationships on Facebook. That just wasn't a thing for me personally. And so when I went on LinkedIn, and I could talk about sales, I could talk about marketing, I could talk about personal development, community, relationships, connections, whatever, people actually responded.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's kind of how I got hooked. It just felt natural. It felt organic. And it's just a place where I could be myself.
No, I really like that. Do you have any compelling stories from Tucson Thrive? Is there a particular story, situation, individual that really made a lot of impact on you, or vice versa, that you might have impacted or somebody else? Like, is there something that happened that's like, wow, like this is really something?
Yeah. I mean, I probably have a ton of stories.
If you have one.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I've been building my LinkedIn personal brand for years. And the thing that I loved about Tucson Thrive is that it was an open door to people that I never reached out to, and vice versa. And so because it's a public virtual mastermind, and we've eliminated all barriers of entry, you don't have to drive across town. You don't have to buy appetizer. You don't have to buy a drink. You don't have to get a babysitter. You don't have to pay for a membership. The people that I never thought I would have a relationship come, and we've become friends. Let's see, Kenneth Pearson and his wife Corey. They're both in HR. He works at the Tribe. Greg Curtis Wakefield. He's a life coach. Him and I have gone very close. Ashley Bright, who you know. Let's see. I mean, honestly, there's just so many. And story-wise, what I think is really interesting is, and this is what people don't realize, the magic doesn't happen at Tucson Thrive, even though it's a great experience. Mm-hmm. The magic happens in person. And so I know two individuals specifically who met through Tucson Thrive, and they started doing business together. And
okay, so you're saying they sort of, they're part of Tucson Thrive, and then after they meet offline at a coffee shop or down the road somewhere else?
Exactly. I mean, we're going to in-person events outside of Tucson Thrive. And that's the beauty of connecting people. Tucson Thrive is just the glue that kind of brings people together. People are collaborating, people are getting clients, people are generating leads. But honestly, it's giving people a voice as well. And I think that's the, I don't know if this is the correct term, but it's the elephant in the room.
Sure.
I think you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You've heard that expression. I'm sure everyone's heard that expression. Right. That's one of my biggest hurdles a lot of the time, because you can connect the people, but you can't, I don't know what happens outside in the private world. And there's a lot of good things that come out of it, but also there's, in regards to a LinkedIn, people don't show up all the time.
Yeah.
And you can give them the connections, you can give them the platform, you can give them the a place to connect with people. And I mean, this is free.
Yeah, there's no barrier.
And yet people don't come. We have a good, solid group, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying, like, I am, and maybe I'm the founder, and obviously I'm biased, but I feel like, half of Tucson should be there.
No, of course. But, the whole idea of if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Business, there's a lot of people on the sidelines in business and entrepreneurship. There are, for every entrepreneur out there carrying a card and knocking on doors and getting knocked down and getting knives thrown at them and all that, for every one, there's probably 20 that are on the sidelines. Oh, I should probably start a business. Oh, this. Maybe they're unhappy with their corporate life. I mean, I, for one, am one of those. Like, I had put my toe in many times to entrepreneurial kind of endeavors. I was on doing some consulting work. We're talking about back in the mid 2000s. And, but I never jumped completely. I always had my day job. And then in 2009, we moved back to Tucson from Albuquerque, and I was building a division of a company, and we had a metric to have it reach $1 million in revenue the first year. It reached a little bit over half of that, like $660K. And so it was like, oh, it's time to shut it down. So we shut it down. I find myself in Tucson with no job in basically the bottom of the recession, 2009, 2010. And so that was, and my wife at the time had a university job as a professor. So I kind of said, okay, now I'll do it because I have no other choice. And I sometimes joke that if I would have known it was this rewarding and this challenging at the same time, I would have done it a lot sooner.
Yeah. So what was that quote you just said about it being easy? If it was easy, more people would do it?
Yeah, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's the thing that I believe, and maybe this is contrary to popular belief, but it probably is easy. Because here's what I found. I do a lot of LinkedIn workshops where literally I tell people everything that I believe they should be doing on the algorithm side and the content side and the personal brand side. And I would say 95% of the people that pay me to train them, they can't execute. And literally, I have laid out step by step what they should be doing, and they can't execute. And so I believe that even though it's easy, some people think hard things shouldn't be easy.
Right. Are you familiar with Clifton Strengths?
Yeah.
So in the Clifton Strengths format, there's 34 of these strengths, which equate to a talent. And the whole premise of this framework is that you should focus on what you're really good at, focus on your strengths. And then what you're not good at, you can either outsource or you build processes around it so you can not have to worry about that. And it's divided into 4 kind of major buckets. There is relationships, influence, execution, and strategy. And people tend to gravitate towards 1 or 2 of those, and then the other 1 or 2 or 3 or 2 are like way down at the bottom. So for me, my number 1 and 2 almost exclusively is influence and strategy. I have almost no execution. And I have very little relationship building. Now, let me say this. I have tons of friends. There's never been a human being that I've met that I haven't befriended. I'm at the grocery store talking to people. Like, it doesn't mean that. It means in the business domain, it means in the way that some people operate exclusively in that. For me, influence is top and strategy is top. And I know that's about myself. And so for me to do something that requires execution as a one of the domains, it takes a lot of energy. So I have the wherewithal, I have the ability to hire people to do the execution part.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of an open discussion because I think it's so powerful. Find out what these strengths are, and whatever you're not good at, hire it out.
Well, I would bet money that execution's probably pretty low for the average American.
Probably so.
Yeah. Because it's the biggest hurdle that I've come across in my coaching career. And that's essentially why I created an add-on service that executes for you. You know what? Pay me and I'll teach you what to do. Try it out. A couple months go by, nothing changes. Okay, then let's step it up a notch.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Going back to that quote that you just said about things being easy. In high school, late high school, I literally would get home from high school and watch 1 to 2 hours of personal development a day. And I'm not exaggerating. I was so deep into the world of Les Brown, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, all these speakers, and I was intentionally trying to brainwash myself into believing what they were selling. And I got hooked into multi-level marketing. Now, I did not necessarily get hooked into the actual selling of a product or a service or whatever it was. I got hooked into conferences, and literally, I went to so many multi-level marketing conferences, not to learn about the product or sell whatever. Literally, I went for the training. How can I be a better salesman? How can I be a better communicator? How can I use neuro-linguistic programming to sound smarter and to, not trick somebody, but, to get what I wanted? And there was one common quote that I remember from those years, and I'm sure perhaps you've heard this because I think a lot of people have. And you would be selling somebody something, and they go, "Oh wow," when it comes to the revenue splitting portion, and they're like, "Wow, you can make $10,000 of residual income if you just get 10 people to do whatever." And the thing that a lot of people would say is, that sounds too good to be true. And that's what reminded me of what you just said about things being easy. And then I always thought to myself, and people would say this, yes, it may sound too good to be true, but what if it was and you never found out?
Right.
And so when I speak with you, what I see is somebody who's had that aha moment, who it's almost like the Matrix, right? You've gained knowledge, but you've been able to turn that into experience, which has unlocked this parallel universe of actually being able to be where you are today and accomplish all the things you have. And I think a lot of people that I know personally don't even want to have that aha moment because
the Matrix is hard, man.
So
it's hard to, let me say it this way. Let me say it differently. It's not hard. It is a trap. It's not always paved in gold, right? There's going to be moments where there's going to be hardship. But what I had a very similar situation when I was a kid in high school. I was terribly shy, believe it or not. I was terribly awkward. I'm still a little awkward, but I'm not shy anymore. And what I did is I one time there was, this is way before your time, there was this set of tapes about self-esteem and mastering your mind and blah, blah, blah that I convinced my mom to buy. And it was expensive. So this is back in like the mid 80s. And I think it was like $100. So now if you do the math, it's probably like $400, right? And or 500. And so I convinced her I really wanted this and whatever. And I would listen to these tapes over and over again. And I kind of recreated myself because I recognized that my shyness, for me, now I'm saying other people, whatever, that's their own thing. But for me, it was preventing me from finding my own voice. And so now, you know, when I speak with my children or other people around me, I want them to find their own voice. Uh-huh. They don't have to be gregarious. You don't have to be out there, you know, slapping backs and telling jokes. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you've got to advocate for yourself and you have to speak when you need to move the needle. So I think that's very powerful what you said about, you know, intentionally creating that for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think what I love is, you know, I don't think I've had that aha moment in my life. At least it certainly doesn't feel like it. But what I love is people who are aware and are stuck in the middle. Because I would say 90% of the people I know aren't pushing themselves to be aware that they can have that aha moment. And the other 10% that I consider myself, like, we're aware that there's an aha moment. We just don't know how to achieve it ourselves.
Yeah, you're in purgatory.
Yeah,
you're in that purgatory, which I've seen many people in, and I've seen people go in and out of purgatory. I've seen people go out, they get out of that mindset of like, oh, I can do it, and they go out and they do something. And then something happens in life and they go right back to it. And some of those do it because they don't know any other way. Yeah. And I do have a few friends that have literally plugged themselves back into the matrix on purpose.
Yeah.
They were that character that wanted to be a rock star, that wanted steak. I forget the guy's name, but you know, they do that.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yep. That's a line from the movie when he's eating the steak. You know, it's interesting because, you know, this topic of imposter syndrome, I can't escape it. And I've done things in my life that I don't talk about often, but if I told people I did them, I think they would be surprised, but also, and I don't want to pat myself on the back, they would say, whoa. And like, for example, like in late 2020, I was recruited to this role at a community. And in the next year and a half, and for 90% of my time there, I was the only salesperson. We generated almost $14 million.
That's compelling.
Like, sometimes I have to snap out of my own reality to say, dude, I was able to do that. Yet most of the days when I wake up, I have this imposter syndrome of, I'm not even good enough for the job I have today.
Right. I understand. And then that's where I struggled. And so I'm going to tell you 3 quotes here. I'm going to tell our audience 3. And you mentioned Zig Ziglar. I happen to love the guy. He's an amazing speaker, orator. He's an old school. He died many years ago, but old school. He was a Baptist minister for a while. He's done a lot of crazy stuff, but he was, by all means of the imagination, he was just this amazing modern day philosopher when it comes to business and sales. So first one, and these are for you personally, because I think that they resonate, but also to our audience, okay? A goal properly set is halfway reached. So if you can set your goals in the right way, you're already on your way to success. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 2, this is really gonna be right at you, okay, Frank?
Bring it.
Personal, but kind of personal, right? Success is the maximum utilization of the ability that you have. Because think about that. You've accomplished a lot in the past 4 years, 5 years, coming up on 5 years at your role. And that's the ability you have. That's it, literally on paper, you've made that happen. And the third one is one of my favorites. And I'm reading this because I want to make sure I get these correct. I know how to paraphrase them, but you can get everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people
get what they want.
Yeah. And that one is obviously what you're doing with Tucson Thrive and all these personal connections you're creating, these collisions as they're sometimes called. So for that, I commend you.
Yeah. And it's interesting. A lot of times I'm very open and I'm very public on the fact that my personal brand is built on riding the coattails of everyone in our community. That's literally how it started. And I think, when I started meeting people, I was in the scene, it was the documentation. And I think that's the big difference between what I do and what a lot of people do, others do, is so many people go to these events, so many people meet other people and they're talking about them, but they're creating the content. And one of the things that I teach is you just have to document it. I'm already having great conversations with people in person or virtually, whatever. That's it. That's the magic. And I just think most people aren't capitalizing on that because they're overthinking it and they have to create something that's maybe not there. But no, I love those quotes.
Those quotes are powerful. And, there's something, you mentioned the coattail of others. There's nothing wrong with that, first of all. Secondarily, there's some philosophy, if you will, that every story that has been told or will be told has already been told.
I agree with that.
Star Wars, The Matrix are just variants of the Jesus story, which are just variants of old Sumerian stories, which are just variants of da-da-da-da. Everything's just being recycled in a different way. It's still very impactful, still awesome.
Yeah.
But remember that, there's going to be your own story is going to be echoed in the stories of others.
Yeah. Well, talking about trends, one of the things that I always tell people is people meet great people have great experiences, people have, whatever happened in their life. And a lot of the times they say, Frank, I don't want to talk about that. My life's not interesting. People don't want to hear what I have to say. And what I always say is think about media. Think about CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. We, in the news world, everyone has the same information, right? There was just a school shooting, right, yesterday or today. That's, I've been hearing a lot about it. Everyone has the information. I think what's unique, and this is what I always tell people, is you have to tell it from your perspective. That's the interesting thing. People, maybe they go to CNN, but do they really go to CNN as the network, or do they go to Rachel Maddow? And that's the thing. Everyone, just like what you said about the knowledge is there, the stories are there. Yes, but we're regurgitating them from our perspective and dropping the insights of what we want to share about the story. And I think that's what most people don't understand about social media or their personal brand is, I can go to Google and type in, tell me, the latest trends about ChatGPT. Or I can go to LinkedIn and go to somebody's profile that's talking about ChatGPT all the time and hear it from their side.
Right. Yeah, we talk a lot at Spark Partners about, I'll pick on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for a bit, that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson might be one, if not the last superstars. Okay, Tom Cruise is already a superstar, right? And he'll eventually age out, and maybe he won't because he doesn't age very much. But the idea is that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is in these big superstar movies that are blockbuster, their budgets are $500 million. They're massive. And the reason we say that is because of a trend of these micro influencers, even nano influencers, right? Somebody who's got 1,000 followers is a nano influencer and they're doing their thing. Somebody's got 5 or 10,000 might be a micro influencer, but we gravitate now towards these different voices, kind of to echo what you say. I follow certain people on my social media feed that have small numbers, but I really appreciate what they have to say.
Yeah.
Or the likes of the folks that run the Diary of a CEO podcast, or all these other things that they're not mainstream media. I mean, if I say Mr. Beast, most people that are over probably 35 don't know who that is, maybe 40. But guess what? My kids know who that is. My kids know what he's done. And so we're carving out new levels of influence and new levels and types of entertainment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, look at YouTube. It's been around for how long? And I still can go to 1 out of 10 people around me and they don't go to YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is the number one search engine for 55 and up.
I'm a YouTube addict.
Yeah, absolutely. And we use YouTube quite a bit as Spark Partners, and we have we've had some, wouldn't say viral, but we've had 12,000, 14,000 views on a particular short, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that this in 2025. So
yeah.
And you know what's crazy about all this, Frank? Is that a half-hour podcast, we just blew through the half hour, and it seems like no time has passed. So in the last minute or two here, first of all, tell us how we can reach you and how we can be part of a community. I know that you're sort of focused on Tucson folks, but give us all that information.
Yeah. So my name's Frank Vidal. I am the development manager at Tohono O'odham Park, but I also do some LinkedIn coaching and ghostwriting for people in Tucson and in the Phoenix area. I also am the founder and host of Tucson Thrive. And so if you go to TucsonThrive.org, you can learn about the program. You can learn about the guest speaker for that specific night. And what's interesting is we probably have had maybe 6 to 10 people join the call that weren't in Tucson. And so just maybe word of mouth. We had somebody from New York. We had somebody from Colorado. I mean, they just saw it on LinkedIn and they wanted to meet people from Tucson for whatever reason. And so TucsonThrive.org, and then Frank Vidal on LinkedIn.
Nice. One other thing that I ask all of our guests is the following. If I was to give you a magic telephone and you could speak to yourself back in high school, in late high school, what would you tell yourself and why?
Great question. I would tell myself to buy as much NVIDIA as I could. That's what I would tell myself. Yeah, honestly, I'm not even kidding. I'm really into finance. I super passionate. And I feel like even though a lot of the times I'm talking about community, I'm talking about beliefs, philosophy, all these kind of emotional ideas. I am a strong believer that if you are not grounded financially, it's really hard to get in the right headspace. And I honestly think that's why so many people struggle with their emotional intelligence, is because they don't have the time to think about those types of things. If they're working nonstop, if they're always tired, if they're working paycheck to paycheck. Right. And so I'm a really, really, really firm believer in financial literacy and in making sure that you set yourself up for success in the financial department. And, working in senior living for 12 years and literally having so many older folks, they all say that. Start investing, put away your money. And I think that was just really ingrained in me throughout those 12 years. What do you think? Has anybody ever said that answer?
No one's ever said that, and that's fine. I mean, this is your voice, your message to yourself. And so, yeah, with that, Frank, thanks a lot for your time. Really appreciate you opening up and sharing with us, at least a bit of a snapshot of what got you here, the story behind the story. And with that, we'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Peace.
Cheers.